Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I love the background. Jason is stabbing you right in the back.
I know. I guess I could move over, but
No,
nonetheless.
where's the fun in that?
Yeah, right. So this is just the fun of the green screen and what you can do with it and you can do anything really, as you know. So anyway, just it's fun to be able to use it, like that. So
Yeah, I someday I aspire to be a green screen guy myself, but for now, I've got the hockey mask and the Crystal Lake Memories book, so that counts. Not nearly as
you've got it
fancy as what
all.
you
I
have going
mean,
on.
I left my stash down in the downstairs and this is it for me today. So
Excellent. Well,
yeah.
we're gonna talk a little Jason Takes Manhattan, huh?
It takes Manhattan for a few minutes at least, but.
I This is one of those alternate reality movies where I know what Rob Hedden had in his mind when he set out to make this movie,
Mm,
with all the having Jason jump off the Statue of Liberty and stuff on the Brooklyn Bridge and all that. I want to visit that reality and see what he could have done,
yeah.
um, as aside from this cruise ship business. Uh, let's
Oh boy, where do we start?
let's start at the end of part seven. Which is kind of where part seven began. Jason is at the bottom of the lake, kind of stuck. Well, actually, this movie has kind of a unique Friday opening in that there's a montage of New York kind of low life scenery going on, with a weird, you know, doomsday radio DJ talking about how terrible things are, and at the same time wishing the graduating class of Lakeview High School the best of luck. And then there's that wonderful song, Darkest Side of the Night, that
I
plays.
love it. I'm telling you, I have a real affinity for the late '80s horror films that just are totally steeped in this kind of stuff.
It's a cheesy song, but it strikes. For as weird as this movie is, I couldn't imagine it starting any other way. But so we eventually get to Crystal Lake, which there's a really cool shot of. After that montage, you see the Statue of Liberty and the camera's sinking below the water, and it gets completely black for like half a minute. And then you come up on Crystal Lake, wherever that's supposed to be in relation to New York City. And then there's a boat that's dropping anchor, two kids making out, and of course they bring Jason back to life. My first question: I don't know where this is in the continuity as far as how long it took place after the New Blood, but
Yeah.
he gets brought back to life because the anchor runs into some thick electrical cable that is running right underneath Jason's corpse. Am I to believe that that was laid there before the whole part seven thing, or did someone just, hey, we'll work around this. We don't need to worry about it.
I think this was. I mean, are you asking me practically what happened at Camp Crystal Lake with the laying down of the? My
Well,
God.
kind of, because I also noticed that when we see Camp Crystal Lake, not only is there like this miniature, this mini yacht, whatever, pulling up, but there's lights on at the camp. It looks like it's fully functioning again. So, however long Jason's been down there, it took an electrical incident to bring him back and start killing people again. I
Yeah,
don't
I
know
mean,
why. Why
I
didn't you just jump off the boat and just head for camp?
I don't know. I mean, this is the Friday the 13th equivalent of the electrical wire in Jaws 2, the cable junction wire. If you remember the end of Jaws 2, of course, as we all do, that's strategically placed, power station right out there. And this is this kind of the same thing. I mean, this is if my memory's wrong, correct me, but it seems to me now that we continue to reanimate Jason with things like lightning and various forms of electricity, and this seemed to me like just Rob Hedden's lazy way of trying to bring him back in a way. And so yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say about that. I just thought it was quite funny that the boat at the beginning of the film is so close to the shore. It feels like it's about 10 feet off the lakefront, yet it's in incredibly deep water. There must be a very steep drop off in that a very small regional lake right there. But
I
you know,
hadn't even thought about that. That presents an entirely different problem. But you know, Rob Hedden had a passion for this movie that kept getting diminished, as he was going up against Paramount and Frank Mancuso Jr. Like, we don't have the money for this. We got to get it going, and get it done. So I can understand having to cut some corners, but this movie presents so many problems that I feel like this is where a lot of the cliches about Jason may have come from, like his ability to be in two places at once and kind of teleport everything. Because I feel like the other films that we've talked about, and you can keep me honest here, it made more sense. Like if Jason was stalking someone through the woods, he wouldn't suddenly appear in front of them where he had been behind them. You can kind of see the person maybe getting disoriented and turning around, so it kind of makes sense. But here he's straight up there. There's a scene later on the boat where the guy who is not Alex Winter, but I was convinced for a decade it was Alex Winter,
Right. Yeah.
was climbing up onto the whatever the observation tower,
Yeah.
and to get away from Jason. And then a split second later, Jason is up there with him, throwing him over the side.
Yeah, I think we just have to say, look, I mean, the series is in the realm of the supernatural now, so then Jason could be anywhere at any time, right? I mean, the only thing that we haven't seen happen is that the ghost of Jason has possessed anybody in any one of these movies, but the supernatural element to the movie, I think, just is a catch-all for any type of spatial irregularities, as you're talking about. And so at the beginning of the film, I mean, this is just he seems that he could be, and throughout the movie, anywhere, even when they're in Manhattan and even when they're in the tunnels, which we'll get to at the end of it. I mean, he just turns up wherever is convenient in that moment, you know?
Yeah, and it's bothersome. Now, I had not watched this movie in a long time, and I watched it for this podcast this morning at 3 a.m. I was just up. So, and I felt like maybe it was the lack of sleep, but the movie felt like it made more sense to me, even though I'm talking about how nonsensical it was, because it's a widely reviled movie. It was at the time the lowest grossing Friday sequel, and may have contributed to the fact that everyone just wanted to walk away from this franchise,
Yeah.
including Paramount, because they sold the rights to New Line, which we'll get to next month. But it's not as bad as I remember it, but it also does not feel at all really like a Friday the 13th movie, from the music to the glossiness of it. I mean, this really is the 1989 MTV generation Friday the 13th.
Totally.
And also the composer of it was the one who was doing the music for the TV series. And watching it this time, I really hooked. And I know you still haven't seen the TV series, but the lead actress in that series, her name was Roby. She looks exactly like Jensen Daggett in this
Yeah.
film, with the giant hair and the kind of vest, and it's all very 89. So it
Yeah.
felt almost like a TV movie version of Friday the 13th.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as I said, I've never gone down the rabbit hole of the TV series, but I would definitely concur that the aesthetic of late 80s horror films is something completely different. And so when we hear that song at the beginning, you know, that certainly is a part of it. The idea, in my view, many of these movies are kind of overlit in a way. They have a glossy feeling about them as well. So the aesthetic is totally different. It's the opposite of being kind of grungy, low budget movies. There's a gloss to them, and this movie certainly has a sheen over most of it. So it looks pretty decent, but it definitely is of that generation. I want to say when I watched it again, and I hadn't seen it in a long time. And I'll confess, I'd never watched it after I saw it theatrically. So that's how long it's been for me since I've seen it, and now I've seen it 2 additional times in the last couple of days.
You watched it twice for this show.
I watched it once to just enjoy it, and then I watched it once to listen to the commentary, which was equally enjoyable, as it made allusions to the Coen Brothers, Hitchcock, The Shining, and so many other movies that this movie apparently was nodding to. But as I watched it again, I was kind of caught up in the opening scenes of the movie. I think there's a lot of talk across the last few movies, as the franchise has started to run out of gas a little bit, that the directors have tried to reinvent the genre in a way for maybe a new audience, because the former Friday the 13th audience has grown a little older at this point. And so the idea that in the last episode there would be psychic powers, you know, that in this one we would be on a yacht, etc. I mean, I can appreciate that this movie is trying to go in a new direction right out of the gate at the beginning of the film. And I have to say, I really, after we get past the opening scene on the boat that's at shore, has come aground almost at shore. The whole setup where they're getting onto the yacht to go out on the ocean cruise, I kind of got a kick out of it because the world building around it that takes place in Vancouver, as we know, where it was shot, is pretty authentic. So I really appreciated the kind of harbor, the local vistas, the trees and the shoreline, the mist and so forth. I thought it was atmospheric in terms of its environmental character in the film for the first part of it, and I really liked that. For a minute, I thought I felt I was forgetting that I was watching a Friday the 13th movie because it was taking place in something that resembled the real world, or a kind of rugged real world, and that to me was different than previous outings where things feel very, very artificial or planted in certain locales that feel artificial in some way. And this felt like it was out in the real world, which I kind of liked. And I got a huge laugh at the beginning of this movie, one of the biggest laughs I've got in any of these movies, and it's probably unintentional, which is the line from Jensen Daggett's teacher, who tells her, "I want to give you this pen because, this once belonged to Stephen King." So the fact that line was written and delivered like that, I got a huge kick out of. And I don't know if you thought it was funny as well, but I kind of had a little affection for this movie as it was kind of getting off the ground.
I laughed at that line, not because of Stephen King, but because of another movie that came out, I think in 1989, Say Anything, where Ione Skye breaks up with John Cusack by giving him a pen.
Yes, right.
Yeah. I had forgotten how much I'm going to struggle to call this character development, but we spend a lot of time with these characters, and they've got these little mini dramas going on. There's Rennie, who's the Jensen Daggett character, the aspiring writer, her weird relationship with her uncle. There's like this tension because he's a teacher at the school and one of the chaperones on the ship.
Yeah.
She's already got a boyfriend, which is something that we haven't really seen before in these movies.
Yeah.
It feels like we're dropping in on a high school movie, and then all of a sudden Jason pops up, which I thought was kind of neat.
It's kind of fun. I mean, as Rob Hedden said, look, I mean, I wanted to model the teenagers in this movie on teenagers I knew existed out in the real world of the late 80s, and so that was sort of his model. I mean, one might say anybody who was ever making a movie about teenagers would want to model them on authentic, real teenagers, but that was what he was going for. So that's interesting. Maybe that's what you're picking up on. I kept thinking that Jensen Daggett actually looked like Carrie Russell, a pre-Carrie Russell Felicity or something along those lines. So I had that in my head as I was kind of watching it. But she certainly is a fresh face at age 18 and pretty unguarded in the movie, and she has a fresh quality about her.
Yeah, I had forgotten, because I hadn't seen this movie in, like I said, a long time. But when I was younger, we rented it a few times for sleepovers and things, and I forgot what a big crush I had on Jensen Daggett at the time, and she still holds up. There's something very, beautiful about her. She's like this weird hybrid of the girl next door mixed with a supermodel who's been made up to look like the girl next door. Mm-hmm. I did like her vulnerability. I also liked the vulnerability of her boyfriend's his character Sean, who's got this contentious relationship with his dad, who's the captain of the vessel that they're going out on, and dad wants son to take over in his footsteps, and the kid doesn't quite want to, because dad's been kind of like a taskmaster about these things. But I really like that scene in the cabin where they're kind of going at it with each other, and the dad's just so excited that he thinks his son is going to take the ship out, and then he's disappointed when he doesn't quite know what to do. There's a scene later on where the captain is talking to his first mate about the regrets he had with his son, and the first mate was like, "Yeah, I've got my kid's 19 months old," and he's the captain's like, don't be too hard on him. Yeah. I loved that, but I hated the fact that right after that scene, Jason comes in and fucking the guy who's got the 19-month-old boy at home just rams him right through the back. I'm like, that's so cold. And there is, for as much as we like the kind of the relatability teen aspects of this movie, there is a real undercurrent of viciousness. I don't recall other Friday the 13th movies where people are begging for their lives as Jason is like standing over them, contemplating how to kill them. He's usually pretty quick and brutal, but there's a lot of scenes here where people are just like, the girl Susie on the boat that we see.
Yeah.
She's hiding in a compartment. Jason opens the door. He takes a long time to take that little trident and stab her in the chest. Tamara, the quote unquote bitchy girl who gets it in the shower. Even the teacher, I think, Mr. McCullough, who's the Rennie's uncle. He's a
Yes.
bad guy, but the way he gets it, he's begging for his life as he's being drowned. It's just, it takes the escapism, the quote unquote fun out of watching people get killed creatively, and makes it a
Yeah.
little bit too real for me.
Well, so you're responding to some of the major criticisms of the entire genre, slasher genre, which followed a lot of these movies, in no small part to Siskel and Ebert's war that they waged against the entire slasher genre, which is that they are mean spirited, particularly toward women. And so when we talk at the beginning of the movie about the character of Susie, who's on the boat, and in that death of Susie, as she sort of is stalked up, and then of course she's cowering down as Jason sort of stands over her, and she's for a number of seconds really begging in a way, or she's contemplating her own death. I mean, this criticism of the entire genre, and I think what you're picking up on is that there's something. How do I say this? I mean, there's something about it that is leering and disturbing and fascinated with suffering, particularly of women, as some would say. Now, I would disagree with this in some regard, because I think the very nature of a horror film is to suspend you in a state of unease in a way. And I think these movies, they do that by tapping into the fear of what you might do if you were trapped and a killer were staring you down. And so I think maybe the idea that it's a male-female thing, that it's women cowering under male killers, is maybe a little bit misplaced. But certainly the idea that you might be trapped and there might be no way out, and that you might have to contemplate those moments where you're going to die. I mean, these are not exactly a part of the Friday the 13th universe, as you mentioned. And in this movie, there are a couple of those. And I probably would take them a little more seriously if I felt that the characters were developed enough, and maybe it's enough to respond to the actor convincingly conveying the idea that they're in peril in a way. But and we'll get into this. I think without sounding like a broken record from the last two movies, and I'll try to come up with a new shtick for the next couple podcasts. I'm having a very hard time like caring about what happens to most of the characters in the movie, because I'm just, even though this one I think is a slight improvement for me, simply because we spend a little more time with some of them. I think I don't care about them enough to feel viscerally impacted by it. Although I think it's a very interesting observation.
And that's the thing, because I had heard that criticism before too, but I don't think I'd ever really associated those with the Friday the 13th movies, or I never thought that you could paint the entire genre, even the stock and slash genre, with that brush of like, oh, it's all just exploitation and people begging for their lives, and it's misogynist and all that stuff. I don't buy into that, but because I think it's let's look at part 7, where I don't remember the character's name, but she's the girl who, got all fancy and did that. She was the nerd girl who prettied herself up to impress the boy. She's hiding in the shack, avoiding Jason. And you can tell she's really scared and she's, fearing for her life, but her death comes very quickly and it happens off screen. And I'm kind of fine with that, oddly enough. It's just this idea that maybe because this is supposed to be kind of popcorn entertainment, and I'm not coming to a Jason movie to contemplate the harsh realities of life and death, to see characters, especially because they're not developed, they are completely disposable in a lot of ways. I think that sends kind of a strange, not message, but a signal. It's like, who cares about these characters? You're just here to watch them get stabbed, and let's let them beg for a little bit. It's a little bit sadistic, and it just bothered me. And like I said, it's not even just a matter of the male killer and the helpless, female, because as I mentioned, the asshole teacher guy, he's even, begging and kind of struggling. And in that moment, you see that he's a human being and what is happening to him is awful. Then you're distracted by the fact that he's just being drowned in a vat of, I guess, toxic waste that's just sitting out in an alley in New York. I'm like, what is this, the Ninja Turtles?
Yes, I know, right? It's a leftover backlot prop from some other movie, like all of the garbage cans that have fires going on in them, which is the typical Skid Row iconography that you just turn to when you don't have any other idea of what Skid Row looks like. So all this alleyways in Manhattan, even though there aren't any alleys in Manhattan and whatever. I mean, but I think I want to just build on one thing that you said quickly, just thematically about this idea of the barbarism related to someone cowering or being afraid of being killed. I think the Friday the 13th series has always been equal opportunity killing, so the amount of men versus women victims is equally balanced in a way. So the idea that women are primarily the victims or being hunted in the movie doesn't hold water at all. If we count it up, the death counts in the movie. I think also that the idea of cruelty or barbarism, as I mentioned, in a regular movie. So right now we could look at the film The Painted Bird, right, for example, and we could say that some of the things that happen in there are just heartrending and very difficult to deal with, and that's because the boy has been made a believable and real character that we have empathy for. But for example, if we take some of the same types of things and look at Miguel Nunes' character in Friday the 13th Part 5, where he's in the outhouse.
Yeah, demon.
And I mean, the scene in the outhouse where he's kind of being stalked by the Jason who's coming through and piercing him as he's coming through, and that's very similar to the scene you mentioned with the character of Susie at the beginning of this movie. And I think to the extent that we like the actor, maybe we feel a little bit there, but since we kind of go to these movies thinking that that's what we're in for and that we're never going to probably get close enough to the people or care that much about them, I think we can just kind of disconnect ourselves from it in a way. And in fact, it's pretty interesting because the behavior could be the same in a serious art house movie or in a slasher movie, but we just approach it differently or we evaluate it differently.
Yeah, it's almost like a matter of expectations, right? I expect to see real uncomfortable to watch human suffering in an art house picture like The Painted Bird.
Yeah.
I don't expect to see that same thing in Friday the 13th necessarily. But you do bring up a good point about Demon's death. And also, as we were talking, I remembered Annie, the cook from the first Friday the 13th movie, when she gets caught up against that tree. It's not long, but she is sitting there saying no, no, and then she gets the knife across.
Yeah. Yeah. So those moments do exist out there in this universe, and sometimes. I mean, these actors can be really good. They can be really effective. And to see, the character of Annie killed off at the beginning of that movie, she's expressed to us in the scene prior to that she's a kind-hearted, good person who's interested in working with children and what her dreams have been. And she's got a very nice, gentle way about her. So I would argue that the terror of the Friday the 13th, the original, comes from that there's some groundedness in reality, and the characters feel like pretty laid back, simple, nice, good-hearted people of the time. And now we're getting to the other end of the series where that part of it has totally been forgotten about. And so I think that's a major producer's miscalculation in the Friday the 13th series, which is that the audience doesn't really care about any of the people. The actors are pretty interchangeable. They only want to see the special effects and they want to see people get killed. And I would just argue that, people we don't care about getting killed, we just don't care,
Yeah, I'm there with you, but it's, again, the disposable nature of these characters. It almost makes it worse because you're really talking about going to revel in the destruction of human life and to think about people on screen as barely being human at all. They're just kind of props for special effects. But we started this series knowing that's kind of what we're getting into. So I think I'm just having some kind of maybe I'm just growing into an old man right before your eyes. But no, one thing I want to ask about, because this is something I'd never picked up on in the few times that I've seen this movie. Jimmy, who's Susie's boyfriend on the boat, he plays a prank on her coming back from dropping anchor where he pops out at her with a hockey mask and a retractable knife. He stabs her in the chest, which is, I guess, is that the Hitchcockian foreshadowing that Rob Hedden maybe mentioned in his commentary?
I mean, literally, he mentioned Hitchcock, I kid you not, no less than 10 times in the commentary. And so yeah, anyway.
Well, so, okay, does Susie know that Jimmy, her boyfriend that she's having sex with, is the kind of guy that's going to pop out with a retractable knife? Because that seems like a big deal. That's like Shelley from Part 3 territory. And I understand having a hockey mask, sure, but it is a hockey mask with the exact same slash in the top that Jason had for the other movies leading up to this. A hockey mask, I might add, that was split in two and then blown up in the end of the last movie. I
Yeah,
mean, continuity. Okay, I understand it's a sin to talk about that in the context of these movies,
I
but
know.
I don't even understand how they thought, yeah, we'll just do it. No one's going to care.
Yeah, like of all the like hoary plot devices that one could come up with, that one in this movie is pretty rich. And the other one is Jason springing out of the water to grab onto the anchor or the rope on the side of the boat as it's about ready to take off out of the harbor. So so. But okay, I mean, we're going to go with it because this is the universe of movies that we're in. So yeah, I mean, I thought the mask, was just par for the course for a movie like this. But the idea that you would just have a retractable blade hanging around for the fun of it was a little bit odd, especially that you would spring it out at the moment when you're in the mood to have sex or something like that. I mean, it just seemed really, really way off. But whatever, we're just going to go with it because it's kind of the rules of the genre. I kind of think the opening sequence is a little bit of a throwaway, although I did think because it takes a little time with those two characters and it plays a little bit with where Jason is or where he isn't, and so there's a little bit of an attempt in that sequence to build some suspense up, as opposed to just have him, as we've seen in other installments, leap out of the grave and stab somebody at the side of the grave or otherwise. So I thought there was a little bit of an attempt to have some play there and to build a sequence that was semi-effective.
Yeah, and I liked, even though it's the 90th time we've heard Jason's origin story in this movie, I did like the actors, their delivery to each other. They're telling this kind of ghost story. Although I did think it was a bit weird that this guy's idea of foreplay is not only scaring his girlfriend half to death with that retractable knife, but also telling you a story of like, oh yeah, we're hovering over a place where there's a dead body because someone went crazy and killed a bunch of people years ago, but don't worry about it, they're just stories, and they jump in the sack. How she's still in the mood after all of that, I have no idea. But I also noticed that she was the first to just say fuck this guy and just like run out the window when when Jason showed up.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, he did everything except point out on the boat's radar that they were hovering directly above an object beneath them. But but you know what? I mean, this is like all the movies. I mean, it's designed to create a quick thrill right up front, and then it's quite a while before anything on that order happens again, as we really get into the establishing of these characters and the relationships, the father-son, the estrangement between Peter Mark Richmond, who's the uncle character, of course, who also happens to be, what's his role at the school? I couldn't quite remember what his role was.
I think he's a teacher because, again, we could spend like 6 hours talking about all the things wrong with the story, but when he confronts Tamra, who's the snobby girl, and she blackmails him by making it look like he was trying to seduce her, he was in her room because she had to present her biology final project to him. Like, they're on the class trip. This is supposed to be after school is over and everyone's done. I don't know what this Donna Martin graduates stuff is all about, but it did not belong in this movie.
I know, but I will say Charlene Martin, who plays that role of Tamara, is just, I mean, sometimes in a movie like this, you could see that there's, even though the person is, sometimes it's even easier to see that a person is talented in a role like this because they're taking something that doesn't exist on the page and they're somehow making it interesting or fun or engaging in some way, and partially because she's great looking, so that she has a leg up in a way, and the other part is because she just has a sense of humor. I mean, the moment where he walks into that room at night and she kind of disrobes and she's got the drawings on her body and everything. I mean, she plays that, she has a lot of fun with that scene. And I think there's something charismatic and engaging about her. So I wasn't surprised to learn that she went on to a career in other higher profile movies.
Well, it's also, it may be because of the required sort of efficiency of this particular story that they had to get through all these bodies before they got, to the boat climax and then get to New York for that climax. But usually I think this might be the fastest that the bad kid, the antagonist kid, has been dispatched in the movie, because she's not around for very long. and I was kind of sad to see her go, especially this time. So like, yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I liked her, scene with Kelly Hu as the sort of the good student who's like trying cocaine for the first time, and she's really the bad seed, and I liked it. I almost wish she'd had as much time as Alyssa from Part 7.
Yeah, she was really good, and you've heard the story about Martin Sheen advising her for 3 hours that she was participating in an evil movie when he found out that she was going to be in this movie, and so she got a 3 hour lecture from Martin Sheen about why she shouldn't be in it.
Yeah, I think I might have been channeling him in my little morality lecture I just gave a little bit ago.
Yes,
These
right.
people are begging for their lives.
I know it's. I mean, the idea that Martin Sheen has seen the Friday the 13th movies just tickles me in a way. Or maybe he hadn't seen them, but he had an opinion about them nonetheless. But she's pretty good in that little role, and interestingly, the scene where she's being encouraged to snort cocaine, and of course she'd never done it in real life, and according to some of the production team on the movie, that nobody had done this on the set. It was a very clean sort of set, and so they had to construct a kind of special straw for her, and it was baking soda or whatever it was, and somebody had to train her on how to snort the cocaine. So it's kind of a cute anecdote, but she makes the most out of a little tiny part.
Yeah, and apparently this is something I either read or watched in one of the Crystal Lake Memories pieces, that she wanted to do something for her death scene on the disco floor,
Yeah.
where Jason was choking her, and she wanted to have some like realistic choking, like life going, death rattle coming out of her sounds. But then they brought in someone to do some dubbing to make it a little bit more conventional. Knowing that, I watched the scene very closely, and it seemed like you could hear some of what she was doing. I didn't really catch any meddling in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I know the MPAA had a problem with that moment, right? Where the original sound effect of her, hitting the floor or whatever had to be excised from the film because it was deemed to be too harsh, and so that had to be redone. But I'm not quite sure.
Now, there's like 100 kids in that graduating class, and they're all in that boat. I think, what, 5 people, including 2 teachers, made it out to go to New York. So
Right.
are we to believe that everybody just drowned below decks? Or maybe is that when Jason is kind of walking around that boat, he's killing people that we are not privy to?
I think it's for you to decide. I would assume that they drown. Nobody ever mentions anybody again after they get off the boat. So there's no question of, gee, we should call the Coast Guard for the others, or I wonder what happened to Sally Sue or whoever. They just get in that boat, and then they go on to the New York Harbor. So I don't really know. I mean, it's kind of a dangling plot thread.
Yeah, there is a reference that because one teacher, Miss Dupree or whatever, she said that she left like a group of kids in the restaurant, and then Sean said there is no more restaurant because it got flooded. But I think there's only like 6 kids there, so I wondered like how these people all perished. Did some of them jump overboard? That would have been a great little like Tales from Camp Blood kind of a thing. If someone jumped overboard trying to get off the Lazarus, which is the name of the ship appropriately enough, like a kind of a cut scene where they think they've made it, they're kind of treading water, and then Jason kills them on his way to New York.
This is about as close to a theory as you've gotten in the last 5 discussions, but I appreciate it. And I think you should write some fan fiction around this.
Well, that's the thing, and I think that's a testament to where this series is going. Is it's less and less engaging on a mental level to even come up with theories. It's just like whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I want to let's touch on something you talked about earlier, which is that when Rob Hedden came into this movie as a first-time director, and was hired by Barbara Sachs, the producer with Frank Mancuso, he hadn't directed a movie before, and of course we know he went on to make another movie called Clock Stoppers with Jesse Bradford, kind of a family sci-fi movie. But this movie, he was his first writing and directing foray on the big screen, even though he'd written for the series and MacGyver and other things. And so he really took and you want to give him credit because he wanted to take a detour away from Crystal Lake, and he also wanted to do something super ambitious, as you touched on earlier, which was to take this onto a cruise and then take it on into New York, and that was going to be expensive, of course, to be able to do all those things as he wanted to do, and department stores and the Brooklyn Bridge and the Empire State Building, and of course all that stuff got nixed. So as they always say, there's the movie you want to make, and then the one you actually do make, and the one he did make was kind of a vast compromise from the original vision of the story, but he does get to New York at a certain point in the movie. I think that a lot of people have a problem with this movie because it promises that it's going to take place in Manhattan, and really it's the last part of the movie that takes place in Manhattan, actually Vancouver for the most part, doubling for Manhattan with the exception of Times Square. And so it doesn't really deliver even on its title in a way. And so it's it has kind of an identity crisis, I think. Although certainly I want to give him credit for doing something different, which is putting it out on the water, actually shooting out on the water, which was tricky as well, having to navigate shooting on, as we know, multiple different boats, because some were exteriors were of the boat that they were using were, the boat was too small, and then they used a bigger one for some of the sets and so forth. So I always find it interesting when we look into movies that are reviled or dismissed immediately or considered to be failures, and we look at the processes behind them that have gone into the production team and all of the thought around what the movie ultimately becomes, that we just don't peel the onion on for the most part with most movies. And Rob Hedden, I think, walked into this movie thinking, I want to do something cool and different. And by all accounts, I think it is different. And maybe when we get to Jason X, we'll talk about how different that one is too. But I think he succeeded conceptually at what he wanted to do. Executionally, it's probably not all that hot, but he did do a reach. And I think some of it came off.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And one of the things I liked that really comes across in Crystal Lake Memories, the book and the doc, is, and I don't know how much of this is him putting on kind of a show for the book or the camera, but I have no reason to believe that he would hold back anything, especially because we've seen so many other cast and crew not hold back. But he seems like a genuinely nice guy who got his big shot, and he was really appreciative of it. And even after ratings board issues, after budget cuts and Paramount saying no to a whole bunch of things, he kept on. He's like, okay, well, we can't do that, we're going to do this, and it's going to be great. And so he made a movie that ultimately was very compromised, and even kind of talks about this in the book. Like, if he had $5 million extra dollars in the budget to do those big set pieces like the statue and the Brooklyn Bridge, that would have been great, but would it have actually added to the box office, which is Paramount's calculation?
Yeah.
But it's one of those situations where if he had that extra money, if it had cost 10 million instead of 6 or 5 or whatever it was, maybe being able to put this in New York proper and give audiences what they had paid for, maybe that would have blown out the box office, or given them an extra $5 million, the margin would have still been the same as far as the profits. Because I noticed in that teaser trailer, it's kind of like the original teaser for Alien 3, where you see, I don't know if you remember this, but you see the egg, and it's panning down, and you see that the egg is hovering over Earth. So everyone's like, oh my God, they're finally going to get to Earth. Mm-hmm. In Jason Takes Manhattan, it's largely, start spreading the news, and you see this person looking out at New York at night, and there's a person walking their dog, and the person looks and sees, oh my God, it's Jason. And there's a montage of all these different New Yorkers screaming in fear of this guy. So you think it's going to be a much bigger scale of a film than it is. And even when he encounters New Yorkers, I don't know if this was a thematic kind of a joke, but they are so disinterested in what's going on. When he comes into the subway, people aren't scattering. They're just like, oh, well,
yeah. That's kind of funny that they're just kind of blasé sitting there now. Now they were able to use an actual subway car in Vancouver, I think, for that, and they just tore right through that moving car. And I was sort of led to believe, when I was kind of digging into this, that there were some real people on that car too, although I can't quite remember if that's the case or not. But the idea of New York in the movie really is kind of comical in a way, that we have these street gangs who are hanging out in Times Square and so forth. And as we mentioned earlier, the Skid Row right there also that seems in very close proximity as well. I mean, there is the shot of them coming up out of the subway tunnel, which, as you know, they built a facade of a subway tunnel because they just wanted to have that particular view of Times Square behind them as they came out. So that's kind of impressive. I mean, they have that 360 shot there that he's able to do. In the actual location. So that's interesting too, visually interesting as well. And I got a little bit of a kick out of it. I really, even though this was the most expensive movie to date, Friday the 13th wise at $4 million, and it pulled in the least amount of box office at that point, 14 something. I just wonder sometimes what all this creativity ultimately amounts to in terms of the success or failure of the movie, because to me the primal fears of being stalked by Jason in some way, they have very little to do with whether it's happening in Manhattan or not, or whether people are out on the water or otherwise. And I appreciate the creativity. I really do. I just wonder if it supersedes in a way the reason the film exists, sort of to scare us in a way. So you're trading one thing for the other, I think.
And that's a great point, because something that is touched on also in the kind of meta material is the fact that this was no longer just a Jason movie. This was a franchise that was competing with another large horror franchise, which was Nightmare on Elm Street,
Yeah.
which is why you had this sort of a soft mandate from Paramount and I think Frank Mancuso Jr. to include some, more trippy visual things in there to get the audience to pay attention. This is why you see Rennie having constant visions of a young Jason popping out of her, at her in the water, or emerging from the mirror over the sink, which I thought was kind of an effective but also very Freddy image. I'm glad that they didn't use the final subway version of that little kid who was supposed to emerge, a small version of him from the melting toxic waste Jason's mouth. I don't remember if you saw that. It was a really hokey gag. But yeah, it's like they're trying to make a Jason movie that was all a little bit Freddy so they could maybe appeal to the same audience. But
yeah,
even though horror movie fans in the 80s would watch all of this, I still feel that on some level you go to these different franchises for very different reactions, very different experiences. And I don't think it quite works. That's why I think it feels a little bit muddled in this case.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, in a way, appreciate what they were trying to do by melding the surreal sort of sequences of Nightmare on Elm Street with Friday the 13th, because really the golden age of the slasher genre from 1978 to 1984, when it had completely tapered off, some might say 82, was where it started to really taper off. But this was well beyond that. And so in terms of the audience expectation, the brand expectation, I mean, this brand new exciting killer, Freddy Krueger, and all of his sense of humor and his quips and his in a way superseding the charisma of any of the characters in the movies. He became the star of the movie. The villain became the star, and Jason really couldn't compete in that way, because he doesn't talk, first of all, so he doesn't have the ability to create a larger than life persona that can scare you and also make you laugh in a way like Freddy did. And also the history of Freddy as well, the whole idea of the luridness of how he became Freddy and was burned in the accident and so forth. That is really played with so many times in Nightmare on Elm Street, in the surreal imagery related to fire and so forth. And there's not a lot of that can be done with Jason, first of all, because he comes out of, at this point, in the late 80s, somewhat of a dated type of horror film at that point, because it had been a few years on from the slasher genre. And so it was still reaching to try to satisfy that audience that had fallen in love with somebody else, Freddy. So how can we make Jason a little more like Freddy? I mean, we could remove his mask as we do at the end of this movie and show a kind of a visage that's not that far away from what Freddy Krueger might look like in terms of how mangled and messed up his sort of look is. We could create sequences in the movie like the boy coming out of the mirror, as you know, in that scene where she sees him sort of come out of the mirror, and also in the drowning sequences as well. He exists, and there's that fantastic moment which could have been lifted from a Nightmare on Elm Street movie where we're looking at in the alley in New York after the car has exploded. There's a ring of gasoline, and inside of the burning gasoline is the a boat that begins to float across the gasoline, and then suddenly we dissolve to the lake where the same rowboat is on the lake, and we go back into the past memory and so forth. And so this elasticity in the story in terms of its ability to incorporate these other elements that were clearly nods to another really successful genre and trying to satisfy the same consumer. We have to give the movie points for that as well, for just reaching and trying to do that. And I think it's very clear when you watch these movies in some that this movie is playing with that kind of imagery and the ability to be flexible enough to incorporate it.
Totally. And I will say that that scene that you mentioned where the oil and the gasoline becomes the lake and you see the boat, that is, regardless of genre, regardless of the fact that we're talking about Jason Takes Manhattan, I think that's a spectacular image. And there's some real artistry and poetry there, if I might use a tired cliche, because it's so beautiful, and it leads to a really great scene between young Rennie and her creepy old uncle. I really like the way that scene was acted. It even kind of calls back the opening scene between Jimmy and Susie, because you get the legend of the lake and in this different context and Jason is sort of seen as this boogeyman, who's also, again, kind of a callback to Nightmare on Elm Street with Freddy Krueger being the boogeyman that the kids are afraid of. But it does, and I'm not straying into theory territory here. This is more of, is this a plot hole or am I missing something? That scene with Rennie, young Rennie, would have been about 10 years earlier than the present day. So they're out on Crystal Lake. Rennie goes into the water because Uncle pushes her because she refuses to learn how to swim. Down there, Jason grabs onto her leg. Now, is that ghost Jason? Or is that supposed to be real Jason? Or does it matter? Because if you want to talk continuity, that would have been, he was a little boy still in like 1959 or whenever the hell he drowned. So it does not line up at all.
So I interpreted it as real Jason. And of course the timing just doesn't work. And if we really start to think about when, it just doesn't work because it wouldn't be able to work. So maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's not supposed to be that, but obviously it was a traumatic incident. And as she's remembering it, if we're supposed to take her as a credible source and that her memory or her repressed memory or whatever's coming back at that moment is real, and we've got no reason to believe at this point that she would imagine something that wasn't real. It's a callback in a way to her past that links her to Jason, which is interesting. We've seen this many times in horror films where there's a past incident that's happened that plays out, something plays out in the modern day. Even Halloween attempted to do that in Halloween 2, as you know, and the franchise is still holding on to that idea to some degree, that so-and-so was so-and-so's sister or brother or otherwise. So I think, I took it as real, but I guess in contemplation, it couldn't possibly be real because the timeline doesn't work. But then the timeline never works,
I know. And that's why maybe it would have been too confusing to have adult Jason be at the bottom of that lake pulling her down and then show the kid Jason in all the kind of drowning images that we see in present day. But I mean, Chris from part 3, she had a traumatic experience where she was attacked by Jason as an older man, from years before. And that was supposed to be like 20 or 25 years ago in this continuity, because they keep jumping forward all these weird times. So it doesn't make any sense. I just got to chalk it up to, hey, this would be cool, but it doesn't make any sense, and we honestly don't care. And that's one of the sad things about this movie is, even though the continuity has been skewered throughout the rest of the films, I don't feel like it's been this carelessly handled in the other movies, where we're not going to try to link anything to anything that's come before or anything that's happening now, frankly.
Yeah. I mean, with the exception of being at the bottom of the lake, right? I mean, that's really it.
Yeah.
The movie. So I think, you're right about that. And so, we can't really hold on to that stuff. So that's why these movies have to be the sum of their parts. So we like 3 of the kills are really good, or we like this actor in this particular role, like in this movie, Peter Mark Richmond, who plays the creepy uncle slash counselor slash teacher slash whatever he is, is a fine actor. He's been in was in so many other things. I mean, he was a reputable actor, TV, movie, Broadway actor who who even to get this role, auditioned, which he said he never did. He would just be offered things prior to this, but he did audition and got it, and made some good money for it, as he says. But I think we just have to look at things like that. Like, I really liked him in this movie. I liked, as I talked about earlier, the actress, the blonde actress, and of course now, miraculously, her name is totally escaping me, Charlene.
Hmm.
So there are other elements. I think we have to just take the movie for things that we like, and then discard the stuff that we don't like. It's probably always been the case with this series, at least with exception maybe the first couple of movies. And in this movie, it's pretty harmless. It's creative. I mean, is it exciting and scary? Maybe not. I mean, is it kind of tongue in cheek in a way? Yes. And so you can have a couple laughs at it. But there are definitely things in it that I think are it's watchable enough. I mean, certainly for me, it was better than the last couple.
Yeah, I'm a fan of part 6, and I like part 7, well enough. But I've always kind of had this, maybe it's just a group think of like, oh, part 8's terrible. I don't think it's terrible. It's got problems, but it's just kind of fun. And if you think about it, oh, it's the one on the boat instead of the one where they're supposed to go to New York, I think that kind of softens the blow. Speaking of blows, we would be remiss without mentioning the great V.C. Dupree, who playing the
Yeah.
high school boxer who looks like he's about 25,
Yeah.
who takes on Jason on a rooftop. And that spectacular scene where he says, "Take your best shot, motherfucker," and Jason just punches his head clean off, and you get that wonderful POV shot of the head tumbling down. And until watching the behind the scenes material, I'd never even thought about that shot, because I feel like it's been done to death in the 30 years since this movie came out. But it's like they took a camera and they stuffed it inside a bunch of Nerf balls and kicked it off the roof to get that POV shot all the way down. It's really inventive.
Yeah, it's super cool, and it also gives you a pretty funny gag when the head turns up in kind of an unlikely place. Just a couple scenes after that, but that scene on the roof is fun. I mean, the boxing scene, which is foreshadowed, of course, with the boxing scene earlier. And V.C. Dupree, of course, as you know, was nobody's idea of a boxer when he auditioned for this movie. So he was forced to bulk up and wear multiple layers of clothes and so forth to look as if he could pull this off, and be fit enough to be able to do it. I think he did do it, and he's pretty good in the movie.
Yeah. So let's fast forward. I mean, we're almost there anyway, but to that ending with the toxic waste flooding the sewers, and that this is where I will step in line with the group. I think this is the worst looking Jason makeup in, well, maybe rivaling the next movie we're going to talk about, but the worst ever. Because they call it jack-o'-lantern Jason. It just looks like it's kind of formless and ashy, and he's got those big jack-o'-lantern teeth and that one eye that's just kind of hanging down, but it looks like it was mummified or something. I don't know what the problem was there, but it's such a disappointment.
Yeah, although it did give me a scare at the moment where he pops up out of the water as they're they're climbing up the railing. They look down, and then he kind of pops up the water into the frame. I mean, it's a cheap shot to just shoot someone that looks like that directly into the frame, because you're going to get a jolt of some sort out of the audience. But the effect is different. I mean, I don't know why he has to look so different from movie to movie, and there's no attempt at continuity between the movie. So that's a totally different story, and just part of Friday the 13th lore that he always looks different. But in this movie, it's not necessarily top notch when the mask finally comes off. It was certainly better in the last one. And I would still argue that part 2 is my favorite, with the kind of shot through the window and so forth. But it's not all that convincing, and it's seen in close up, and it's seen in pretty bright light. I think if you have effects that are not that convincing, you should change your lighting strategy so that we can't look at them in up close detail as we can look at it in this case. And if it were just a little bit darker or a little bit more obscured, or if it were underwater, or we're just a little bit something else, I mean, we wouldn't feel as you do, which most of us do, that it's not a very good effect, right?
Well, I think part of the lighting might be because they had to be able to film this dark, toxic waste flooding a dark sewer. So they had all those kind of hanging lanterns swinging back and forth. So I can understand it, but you're right. You got to hide that stuff, or just come up with a better effect.
Or just not show us, just show up for a brief moment, right? I mean, it's just more than a brief moment in the movie. I mean, it's more than a few seconds if I remember right. So it's there,
And I think part of it is because when Jason all right, Rennie takes a vat of toxic waste, which is, again, just hanging out down in the sewer, she picks it up with her bare hands and throws it at Jason. Now it's melting off his skin, but we can see the way she's grabbing the tank. She's clearly like, this stuff is getting on her too.
Yeah, totally.
But
Totally. So it's like the Toxic Avenger, right? But and I thought that was funny. I mean, where the hell, why the hell is there a 5-gallon bucket of toxic waste sitting down in the tunnels underneath, Manhattan, just randomly sitting there, right? So it doesn't really make any sense. I mean, this is all just contrivance, right? But again, we just have to go back to our whole feeling that we can't ask any questions about this stuff. But technically, yes. I mean, she does have it on her hands, right?
yeah, and when she throws it on him, his mask comes off, and we see that awful visage, and he's kind of screaming. It's like this is not very Jason-esque. Like I don't think we've ever seen him react to anything aside from like a heavy breathing. And also the breathing in this movie is out of control. It sounds like he's constantly hooked up to a scuba apparatus.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think that the idea of him screaming and in my view, there's some attempt in this movie made. I don't know whose part it's on. If it was on Kane Hodder's part or Rob Hedden's part to make Jason some sort of a sympathetic figure. I mean, there's just far too many shots of a drowning boy in the movie for us to not feel like he's supposed to be in some odd way a kindred spirit with her. I don't know. I mean, there's something about it that we're supposed to be sensitized to him, I believe, or at least I think when he screams, we're supposed to be. And I think even Kane Hodder picked up on that and didn't necessarily love that aspect of it near the ending. But yeah, there's definitely something else going on there. And as Rob Hedden said, look, I mean, there is a scene in the movie where a very funny scene in my view where Jason saves Jensen Daggett from the gangbangers who have decided to shoot her up. They not only do they kidnap her and carry her off to an alley, but they throw her down and they're going to shoot her up. Apparently, so they can assault her, which is what almost comes after that. But Jason comes into the alley and he actually saves her from these two guys, and so. I don't know how we're supposed to feel about him because it's the first time in a movie where he has saved a victim and maybe said, you don't have the right to kill her. She's mine. I'm going to kill her. So it's kind of a funny moment, and there's some mixed messages about Jason, I think.
Well, yeah, I read it as he wanted to kill her. This guy was in the way because he was literally on top of her. And then after he gets the hand through the chest, his friend comes out from around the corner and starts shooting a gun at him. So Jason kind of takes his attention away and goes to that dude. But I will say, and I'm glad you brought this up because I almost forgot about it. This is probably the first time, I think the last, where we've had a final girl in a Friday movie who spends like the last 20 minutes, 25 minutes doped up on heroin. And I had forgotten that detail, but it really comes across in Jensen Daggett's performance that she's disoriented for the entire rest of the picture. She's not quite with it, except when the adrenaline kind of kicks in a little bit in the sewer, but she's having dizzy spells. She's, kind of out of it. And I thought that was a really cool little handicap to her escaping, this killer. Because otherwise she could have just been with it enough to run to the police or whatever, but she's kind of disoriented.
Yeah, she is. And so it's kind of funny. I mean, there's also another funny drug moment in the opening sequence of the movie where I believe it's those two same guys are in an alley and the one just grabs the syringe and jams it into his arm. I mean, literally jams it in. And there's no sort of, whatever you do with the paraphernalia to make that happen convincingly. It's just obviously, a very false moment, but nonetheless,
he was hardcore.
One thing he was. One thing we haven't talked about is the stories of nudity on set. Now these are many storied stories of this across the Friday the 13th franchise of actresses who've either gone naked or refused to go naked or were coerced, almost coerced into going naked, and coerced in their auditions into going naked in their auditions, even when their characters might not have been naked in the movie. I mean, there's so many stories like this in the Friday the 13th world when you start to sort of dig into it. And so essentially, I thought there was a very funny anecdote in the movie, if you remember that, or in the kind of research around what happened with Jensen Daggett and Rob Hedden's efforts to persuade her to go naked. Here was an 18-year-old actress who was on top of the world. She was the lead in a movie. She was shooting in Times Square, and she felt it was just an incredible moment for her. And she had a director who was trying everything he could do to get her naked. And this was sort of, as he said, kind of at the behest of the producers, because this was a Friday the 13th movie, and this is when we talk about exploitation and what that means. I mean, you're exploiting those elements, right? The sex and the violence, and so it would be the first time that we really had done that with a final girl, our
Yeah.
lead girl character, and she didn't want to do it, and everything he tried to do to persuade her to do it, she didn't want to do, and she ended up winning that battle. Now, that wasn't the case with Charlene Martin, of course, who goes and is in the shower scene, is topless in the movie as well. And that very funny anecdote is, as Rob Hedden was trying to explain to her that it was important for the scene and how he was going to light it, where he just stripped totally naked and got into the shower, stood exactly as he wanted her to stand, just so that she would feel less self-conscious about it. And so then suddenly it was totally fine for her to do it, and she felt comfortable with it. But that's kind of a funny anecdote. Now you have to imagine in the Me Too moment that this sort of onset story wouldn't go over so well.
No, especially like the tag of that story, which is that they were rolling during that. And we see a little bit of that footage in the documentary. But I guess that got sent to Paramount as part of the dailies, and it really freaked the executives out. They're like, what the hell are they doing down there?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I think, you know, all in all, when we put this movie together, I mean, it has kind of a bad reputation, and I mean, maybe it doesn't deliver what we're sort of expecting from it, but there's something harmless about it, and it's not necessarily that bad. And even though the MPAA took the scissors to it, like they did to many of the other ones, I think I as these movies go, this one isn't all bad.
I can't believe I'm agreeing with you on this, but yeah, I'm I'm right there. This is another one of those cases where for decades I've been carrying around this thing of like, oh, it's Jason Manhattan sucks,
Yeah.
but now I'm like, it's all right. It's like middle grade Jason that could have been improved by some external factors, but it is what it is, as they
You
say.
gotta laugh at this stuff, Ian. I mean, like, you got a character in the movie, a character who's slash punk metal guitarist, and she as soon as the boat takes off from the harbor, she goes down into the bowels of the I don't know if it's the engine room or wherever it is. She's on the scaffolding. It looks like she's standing above like a Broadway play or something. I mean, that's what it feels like. And she gets killed down there. I mean, so why she went down there, who knows? Why she couldn't play on the deck of the boat, who knows? I mean, but just the whole contriving things at the opposite of logic in almost every one of these examples that we're talking about, just to set up these murders. I mean, there's something endearing about it, even though neither one of us is going to say this is a good movie. It could be a lot worse.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the rocker girl, because her character's name was JJ, and watching this morning, I forgot how much I like her character for all the 3 minutes that she's on screen, because if she had lived, there would have been this great, Betty and Veronica Archie kind of like a weird love triangle, or aspiring love triangle, because you could tell, had a crush on the video geek guy, Wayne, who was totally interested in the rich snobby girl. Or I guess some kind of wonderful is probably a more adept description or analogy. But she gets killed within 3 minutes of being on screen. I love the foreshadowing. She's like, "This is a great axe," and then of course she gets her head chopped open with the guitar by Jason. But yeah, I thought she was a fun kind of a cute character, and I was like, I could just watch a whole movie about what if Jason never showed up on this boat? What would the dynamics have been like?
I know. I mean, the one thing we should say quickly, and there's a funny anecdote from the final scenes of the movie where Jason, of course, we've talked about the toxic waste. We should mention that in the moment where the water comes rushing in to the tunnels, that Kane Hodder actually claims that the moment where Jason vomits, and of course when the water engulfs him and he goes back and regresses into the child memory of being drowned, he vomits out all of this water. Because he's being reminded of his drowning, and it kind of overpowers him. But Kane Hodder says that he actually did that he had drank a whole bunch of water before that, and that actually was him, like vomiting up all of that water. And that seems outrageous to me, because so much water actually comes up at that moment.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you saw that, but that was kind of a wild moment.
That I missed that story, but yeah, how much water can one person hold? Last thing,
Yeah.
because I had to actually go look this up because I had forgotten about it, or I didn't think, I couldn't believe my eyes when Jason goes into the diner, the cook comes out and he attacks Jason for messing up his place. That cook is Ken Kurtzinger, the guy
Yeah,
who would play Jason in Freddy vs. Jason. I thought that was
yeah.
and he gets his ass handed to him, which I thought was a nice bit of poetry.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, all the Jasons. I mean, Kane Hodder, actually, they almost bypassed him for the movie because they just had a habit of changing Jason every movie. So they never thought the person who did it before would want to do it again. So we'll just get somebody new. And then Kane Hodder said, no, I definitely want to do it. And so if that hadn't happened, he would have been a kind of a one movie Jason. And then, of course, he went on to become the most frequent Jason and the one who people think of when they really think of Jason more than anybody. So that was interesting. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the one other casting element to this movie, that Pamela Anderson and Elizabeth Berkley and Dee Dee Pfeiffer and Renee Estevez. I mean, they all auditioned for this lead character, and none of them got it. I think the one who got closest to it was Elizabeth Berkley, but something just didn't quite click.
Well, she had the hair for it, because she and Jensen Daggett and Kerry Russell, for that matter, had the same kind of a hairdo. If Renee Estevez had got it, that would have been totally crazy, because I think it was either this year, 89 or 90, that Sleepaway Camp Part 2 came out, where she was the survivor girl in that. That would have been just totally weird.
Totally.
Yeah. But yeah, I think we've pretty much exhausted Manhattan. And yeah, looking quote unquote forward to next month when we switch movie studios to talk about Jason Goes to Hell, the quote
Yeah.
unquote final Friday.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. So we're almost winding it down here, and the one thing we will say is that even though there are interchangeable elements in all these movies that have to exist, right? I mean, there is really a push in the second half here toward more creativity and going in different directions and shaking things up and trying to reinvent the formula in a way. So let's give props to these movies regardless of what they might do or not do in other capacities. They're all pretty creative.
Definitely. I might feel differently about that element of the conversation next month, because I don't have any fond. Okay, I've got like two fond memories of Jason Goes to Hell. I just mostly remember it as a slog. So we'll see. But thank you again, Lee. And yeah, I appreciate you going on this. This is month number 8. I can't believe we're almost a full year into talking about Friday the 13th. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're getting close. So onward to next month, and we'll go back and revisit that movie, which I haven't seen in many years. So I'm looking forward to it.
All right, sir. Well, take
All
it
right.
easy.
All right.
All right.
Thanks.